Formula One can be a very cruel sport. There have been countless times where drivers have dominated from the start of a race, only to have a mechanical failure or another mishap within sight of the checkered flag. From Nigel Mansell's showboating antics at the end of the 1991 Canadian Grand Prix, to Mika Hakkinen falling victim to engine failure on the last lap at the Circuit de Catalunya in 2001, whether it's complacency from an over-exuberant celebration or just downright bad luck, the results you see in the so-called pinnacle of motorsport aren't always earned in a fair or deserved way. The layers of politics that can influence a hopeful contender's career could mean that two drivers of the same or similar abilities may come into F1 concurrently, yet they may have completely different trajectories during their time in the top tier of European-based open-wheel racing. Most of the truly great competitors can impress no matter the circumstances, and even if they have a slow start, the cream always rises to the top, or that's how it's supposed to be. There are two prominent examples of this concept, the most recent being in 2007. The incumbent GP2 champion Lewis Hamilton was thrust into the spotlight, instantly being placed in almost inarguably the fastest car on the grid straight away, and in the 17 years since has amassed 7 world championships and over 100 race victories. Another great driver, who debuted that year, started off a lot slower. The German Sebastian Vettel made his Grand Prix debut mid-season at the United States in Indianapolis, and scored points first time around. He would also complete the second half of that year replacing the outcast Scott Speed at Toro Rosso, eventually winning the Italian race in 2008 for the team before moving up to the senior Red Bull outfit. He went on to win several more races, then was victorious 4 seasons in a row, obtaining the same number of titles that Alain Prost accrued in his entire career by the age of just 26. Vettel's rise and fall was extremely prominent, while Hamilton has stayed mostly consistent throughout his time in F1, and it's a similar story with Michael Schumacher and Mika Hakkinen, as despite the pair both entering the sport in the same year, while it took Schumacher literally 1 race to get into race-winning machinery, it took Hakkinen 2.5 years of driving for midfield team Lotus, before joining McLaren, who were also at the start of a slump that wouldn't be resurrected until a few years later. By the time the Flying Finn won his first race at Jerez in 1997, Schumacher already had 2 world championships and 27 Grand Prix victories to his name, yet for the next 3 seasons between 1998 and 2000, the duo had one of the best rivalries in the history of Formula One, battling hammer and tong every time they were close out on track, with legendary moments such as at Spa in the year 2000 where Hakkinen used the back marker of Ricardo Zonta's BAR to make an overtake on the German in a fantastic way. The instant success stories of Hamilton and Schumacher are fairly rare, and the examples of Hakkinen and Vettel taking slightly longer to reach the top are even less commonplace. But the saddest of stories are those where a very talented driver is unable to show their potential due to factors outside of their control, and they get chewed up and spat out by the brutal merry-go-round that is the driver market of F1. This is where the title of today's video comes in. After a long-winded and very convoluted explanation of everything that can go right in a great career, let's take a look at all that can go awry if things don't fall into place for someone who has lots of skill. Let me tell you the story of the lost potential of Stoffel Vandoorne.
Juan Manuel Fangio is in the lead on the last lap of the German Grand Prix.
Jim Clark drives the Formula One Lotus Sport to victory on the racetracks of the world.
And look at that! Out that, colossally, that's Mansell! That is Nigel Mansell! Alain Prost has taken the advantage. Senna is trying to go through on the inside, and it's happened immediately! This is amazing! Senna goes off at the first corner.
And I've got to stop, because I've got a lump in my throat.
Stoffel Vandoorne was born in Kortrijk, West Flanders, Belgium, on the 26th of March 1992. He got his first taste of racing visiting his local kart track aged 6, and started karting himself when the owner of the circuit in question gave him his own minikart. Due to a lack of financial backing, Vandoorne often struggled to complete full seasons, but in 2008, aged 16, he won the Belgian KF2 karting championship, then came second in the FIA Karting World Cup the year after. In 2010, he advanced to single-seaters, competing in the F4 Eurocup 1.6 series, which is the modern-day French Formula 4 championship, and he won the title as his first attempt, although there was only one other notable driver in the field, that being future Formula E stalwart Norman Nato. Vandoorne made the jump from 1600cc machines to ones containing engines with 2 litres of displacement in 2011, driving in Eurocup Formula Renault 2.0. It was a much more stacked field than the year before in the lower category, and Stoffel finished the year 5th in the standings behind 4 future F1 prospects, those being the champion of the series Robin Frijns, runner-up Carlos Sainz Jr., 3rd place man Daniel Kvyat, and the driver just ahead of our protagonist, Will Stevens in 4th. Despite failing to break the top 10 in any of the first 5 races in the 14-round schedule, Vandoorne got a podium at the second race held at the Hungaroring venue, along with 3 4th places, 2 5ths, and a duo of 6th positions, as his worst finish in the latter 2/3 of the campaign was a 7th at the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit. He remained in the same series for 2012 with renewed competition from a returning Kvyat, the aforementioned Natto, Nick de Vries, and 2 16-year-old French drivers by the names of Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon. Stoffel took 6 pole positions, 4 wins, and 11 podiums in 14 races to beat Kvyat to the title by 10 points, as the pair had more than double the tally of 3rd place man in the standings Oliver Rowland. A big move came for the recently crowned Belgian driver for 2013, stepping up to replace the incumbent Formula Renault 3.5 champion Robin Frijns at Fortec Motorsport. As well as this, he also joined the McLaren Young Driver programme as the Woking outfit took an interest in his precocious talents. He won another 4 races in Formula Renault, including getting a double treble in the pair of events held at the Moscow Raceway, on his way to 2nd in the standings behind Kevin Magnussen, and ahead of esteemed competitors like Antonio Felix da Costa, Will Stevens, and Sergei Sirotkin. He switched from Formula Renault to GP2 for 2014, driving for ART, and won the season-opening feature race in Bahrain. He struggled after that until the midpoint of the year, failing to score in 6 of the next 7 events until his results picked up after the Silverstone round. Another win came in the Hungarian sprint, along with 2 more features in Monza and Yas Marina, scoring in 11 of the final 12 races of the campaign. He finished 2nd behind Jolyon Palmer and just ahead of Felipe Nasr in his rookie season, then stayed with ART as he embarked on a hopefully successful sophomore season. He won all of the first 4 feature races in Bahrain, Catalonia, Monaco and Spielberg, getting runners-up in the first 2 sprints and the one in Austria, along with 8th in the shorter Monaco race. He got 3rd in the main Silverstone event, then got 5th and 2nd in the feature and sprint race respectively in Hungary. He went back to winning ways in Spa, then took 2nd and 3rd in Monza before another feature race podium in 3rd and 4th in the sprint at Sochi clinched his championship with 2 rounds left to run and 4 races spare. He won the 2nd Bahrain feature race of the season and the one in Abu Dhabi too, finishing 2nd in the Sakhir sprint. Over the course of the 2015 GP2 season, Stoffel Vandoorne won 7 of the 11 feature races, getting a 2nd place in Monza and 3rd in both Silverstone and Sochi. He kept up good results in the sprints too, as despite never being victorious in the shorter events, he got 5 second places in the 10 that were completed, as well as 3rd in Monza, 2 4ths in Spa and Sochi, 8th in Monaco and 9th in Silverstone, the latter of which being the only race he failed to score points in all year if you ignore the cancelled sprint in Abu Dhabi. 4 pole positions, 7 wins, 16 podiums, and an average finish of 2.7 across a 21 race season. He scored 341.5 points compared to the 2nd place man Alexander Rossi, who had 181.5 and absolutely whitewashed the field. Vandoorne holds the record for all-time most wins, most feature race wins, most pole positions and most consecutive pole positions, most podiums in a single season, most points and most points in a single season in GP2 history, with better second-tier performances than anyone before or since, even after the rebrand of the series to its current guise of F2. He was not signed to an F1 team for 2016, instead competing in Super Formula, where he took pole in Fuji, won the first race of 2 at AIDA, the ex-host of the Pacific Grand Prix during 1994 and 5, as well as being triumphant in the last round of the year in Suzuka. Despite not initially being planned to participate in F1 through 2016, he stepped in for an injured Fernando Alonso at the Bahrain Grand Prix after the Spaniard was injured following a crash with Esteban Gutierrez in Melbourne. The Belgian qualified 2 places ahead of his experienced and well-established teammate Jenson Button, then during the race made his way up to a points-scoring position, eventually finishing in 10th. It was the first time a rookie reserve driver had scored points on their debut since Sebastian Vettel did so for BMW Sauber in 2007 at Indianapolis. Despite Vandoorne not appearing anymore on track in F1 throughout 2016, following Jenson Button's mid-season announcement that he'd be retiring from F1 at the conclusion of the year, the young Stoffel was selected to be his replacement, partnering Alonso, the driver who gave him his Grand Prix debut. His 2017 season started with a struggle in Australia as he was knocked out of Q1 in 18th, while Fernando was a second clear in 13th. Then while Alonso had to retire from the race, Stoffel finished last on the road in 13th. He struggled again in China qualifying, half a second off his teammate counterpart, then got struck down by fuel pressure problems on lap 17 in the race. He didn't even start in Bahrain thanks to a water pressure issue in the power unit. Then at the Russian Grand Prix, only the 4th round of the season, Vandoorne took the first of many engine component penalties, accumulating to 15 dropped places, which meant starting last as he only qualified 17th. He recovered to a lowly 14th, yet despite taking on more power unit parts in Sochi, had to put on more new ones in Catalonia as well. He crashed on lap 32 of the race with Felipe Massa, which forced him into another retirement, and for the Monaco Grand Prix was given a different teammate to usual. Because Alonso was busy trying to win the Indy 500 on the same weekend as the race in the Principality, Jenson Button came out of retirement for one race to take his place. Vandoorne crashed in Q2, although he still got through to the final session in 7th, but was unable to take part in Q3, meaning Button was ahead. Jenson started from the pit lane anyway, and crashed into Pascal Wehrlein in the race, while Stoffel had his own incident with Sergio Perez on lap 66. He was half a second behind Fernando in Montreal qualifying as the two-time champion returned, and struggled to 14th on race day. Vandoorne had more grid penalties in Baku, and in the first race of the year both he and Alonso finished, he was half a minute behind his teammate. Just a 10th separated them on Saturday in Spielberg, before only Stoffel reached the checkered flag in the main event, getting 12th. The Belgian out-qualified Fernando for the first time all season in Silverstone, beating him by half a second in Q2 and starting 9th. He unfortunately dropped to 11th on Sunday, but reached the lofty heights of Q3 again at the Hungaroring, finally scoring his first points of a so far lacklustre campaign by scoring a 10th place finish. More grid drops took Vandoorne out of contention in Spa, then beat Alonso on Saturday again in Monza, managing to somehow get into the final segment of qualifying at the most power-dependent circuit on the entire calendar, albeit in wet conditions. He took yet more penalties for engine components, which put him back to an 18th place start, but it was all for nothing anyway, as Stoffel had electrical failure on lap 33. At the chaotic Singapore Grand Prix he finished in 7th, then repeated that result at the last ever F1 event to date held in Malaysia, while finishing 35 seconds clear of Alonso. A lacklustre 14th in Suzuka came before consecutive 12th places in COTA and Mexico, in the latter of which he took more grid drops. Another retirement in Interlagos preceded the season finale in Abu Dhabi, where he struggled and was more than a minute behind Fernando at the conclusion of the race. He got grid penalties for engine components, averaging to 9 per weekend, and despite scoring points half as frequently as Alonso, it wasn't a complete pasting, only losing out in the points standings 17-13. He held up a lot better than many of Fernando's much more accomplished teammates like Felipe Massa and Kimi Raikkonen, and it was his first full-time season. He was a quarter of a second behind on average in qualifying and 18 seconds off in the races, although there was only 6 times both of them finished to be able to collate that data, 4 of which came in the final 6 events. Stoffel really got into his groove after a shaky start to the year, with the highlight probably being 7th in Sepang, well clear of Fernando, and he outscored him 12-7 after the summer break. Considering it was practically his rookie season, and he was up against a well-known teammate career killer, his performances most certainly went under the radar. 2018 would need to see a step up from Stoffel, as McLaren finally ditched Honda for Renault power units, and he was now heading into his sophomore season. Australia saw him qualify on the 6th row alongside Alonso, and while the Spaniard finished a supposedly fantastic 5th, 4 places clear of Vandoorne, the gap was a mere 7 seconds on the road. It was a similar story in Sakhir as they scored 7th and 8th, with Stoffel playing a supporting role just 10 seconds adrift. Then in Shanghai he struggled, slumping to 13th while Fernando took another successive 7th place. Alonso replicated the result from the previous rounds again in Baku, while Vandoorne was 9th, just a small margin behind, then retired with gearbox trouble in Catalonia. A dual pair of races in Monaco and Montreal put Stoffel 14th and 16th, before he was 12th in Paul Ricard and didn't reach the end in Austria. A poor qualifying was resurrected in Silverstone, as despite being 3 places behind Alonso, the time gap was less than 5 seconds at the end of the race. Then he qualified last in Hockenheim before recovering to 13th. He failed to finish in Hungary, then had a string of bad results from the Belgian, Italian and Singapore Grand Prix weekends. Vandoorne performed decently well in Japan, less than a second behind Fernando in the race, then after getting 11th in COTA, broke his 14 race long points drought by getting 8th in Mexico. A last place start in Interlagos was converted to 15th on race day, 20 seconds clear of Fernando, then he struggled to 14th in Abu Dhabi, finishing 8 seconds behind his teammate. Overall, his race performances in 2018 were decent, as he more often than not finished within 5 or 10 seconds of Alonso, but his overall promise was let down by his bad form on Saturdays. He qualified last 5 times and failed to get out of Q1 at all after the 7th round in Canada. A car that finishes 6th in the Constructors should not be performing that bad, especially when, although it was clear that the car fell off considerably throughout the season, Fernando never struggled as much as Stoffel. Vandoorne scored points half as frequently as his teammate and had a highest result of 8th, while Alonso got 4 7ths, 4 8ths and the 5th place in Melbourne. On average, in the races both drivers completed without issue, the gap was only 8 seconds in Fernando's favour, which shows that Stoffel wasn't horrendous, but his atrocious qualifying form really set him back. I'd argue that had he started the races from the same place as his teammate, he could have competed against him, but that's stretching reality. There were also rumours that Vandoorne wasn't getting the same parts as Fernando, which would explain a lot of his late season capitulation, and it's a very Alonso thing to happen, where he gets favoured over his teammates. Stoffel Vandoorne wasn't a bad Formula 1 driver. I think he would have been a good teammate to Lando Norris had McLaren not signed Carlos Sainz instead, but even with his career, just as those 2 full seasons and the one-off in Bahrain 2016, he was going up against Jenson Button for 2 races, both of which he outperformed him in, and Fernando Alonso, who was still a very good driver, capable of fantastic results. The calibre of competition he had is nigh on incomparable in the modern era as a rookie, and I think that considering how easily Fernando chewed up and spat out the likes of Jarno Trulli, Giancarlo Fisichella, Felipe Massa, Kimi Raikkonen and Esteban Ocon, all of whom are Grand Prix winners or champions in their own right, Vandoorne stood up well against these names. Although he's done testing and simulator work for many teams since his departure, his main post-F1 focuses have been Formula E, where he became a champion, and WEC, where he finished 2nd in 2019 and has stood on the podium twice at Le Mans. So it's not like he's done nothing with his career since 2018, but I genuinely believe that had he gone up against anyone but Alonso during his 2 seasons in F1, he would still be in F1 now. He was a classic case of wrong place, wrong time. He was a McLaren junior and driver during their worst period since the 1990s, and unlike Mika Hakkinen, who suffered from 1994 to 96, he didn't have a thoroughbred career destroyer for a teammate. Not all of the reasons why Stoffel Vandoorne got chewed up and spat out of F1 are Fernando Alonso's fault, but a large part of his fate was caused by the Spaniard. Anyways, with that being said, I think that brings today's video to a close. I hope you enjoyed me detailing the lost potential of Stoffel Vandoorne, and if you did, please remember to like, comment and subscribe to see more content from me in the future. You can also subscribe to my Patreon if you'd like to see exclusive content, get videos a day early, and have an opportunity to converse with me personally for as little as $1 per month. Big shout out to my already existing Patreon subscribers Andy Lamberts, Eamon Al Dowdy and George Stratford, and you can also follow my X/Twitter account where I post boiling hot lava takes on F1, IndyCar and NASCAR, and follow my Instagram for behind the scenes updates. With my shameless plugging over though, I'm Nedzo and I'll see you all later. Bye!